Welcome to Virtual Cam. This application is specifically designed for beginning photography students so that it could assist them for better understanding the complex photography techniques such as film speed setting, aperture setting, and shutter speed setting. Uh, each the virtual cam application basically is being deconstructed uh, into individual settings at first. So the purpose for that is by deconstructing the actual application and breaking it up into easily digestible parts, the beginning photography student can better understand each setting more in depth before adding additional complexity to the learning process. So the first lesson plan, so the application basically is embedded in a website, complimentary website, and it consists of 4 lesson plans. The first lesson plan basically discusses only how this beginning photography student can manipulate the film speed. There also an additional link here in case some users prefer to have the application larger. And let's say if you're on your laptop, maybe you want it smaller. So you have the choice of making it larger or having it smaller depending on your device. The film speed, again, when we look at this interface, we can see that the application is being deconstructed into film speed, shutter speed, aperture setting, and original image setting, and manipulated image preview boxes. We can also see that all the images have been shot with a 50mm lens. So as the photography students interact with the different film speeds, they can automatically see a change happen in the manipulated image window, and they can automatically also see that the film speed feedback box updates in an orange text, while the aperture setting and the shutter speed setting are locked into inactive mode or default mode. So by deconstructing the individual settings into digestible pieces, the photography student can better understand how the higher film speed number is basically more sensitive to light, thus better suited to use for darker lighting conditions. They can also they can also notice that the lower film speed produces much more saturated colors than the higher film speed. So this concludes the first lesson plan on film speeds. The second lesson plan is basically focused on the aperture setting. And again, we have an option to click on the actual link to get the aperture setting larger, and basically manipulate the f-stops. So again, as I manipulate the different f-stops, a few things are happening. First, I can see that the iris of the lens opening, which allows the light in, basically gets larger at lower f-stop numbers. I can also see that by choosing a lower f-stop number, which produces larger lens opening, I get more of a depth of field where the background blurs out significantly, where in the lower one, actually it's a little hard to see that, but you can actually see, you can read the text, and you can see the bird cage a lot more clearly than, for example, when we move to a lower f-stop number. You can also see that the stones that are closer to the camera at f2.8 are focused, but the ones that are farther away are out of focus. Whereas in lower number f-stop, you can see that almost all of the stones are in focus. Going back to the actual website, there's also additional information that can help the photography student, to better understand how more lighting and larger opening creates more shallower depth of field versus a smaller opening which produces a deeper depth of field. You can also see an animation and textual information about the different aperture settings and what each one of these settings basically do, as well as some image references to help the photography student to better visually understand how the different f-stops affects the image. There's also an aperture exercise where based on this understanding, the student learner can actually go out and practice to better understand this process. However, from initial standpoint, by simply clicking on the actual settings, the student can automatically understand how the different settings affects the finalized image. Again, only one setting is working at a time to allow the beginning photography student to build information and build knowledge and not get overwhelmed by too much information all at the same time. In the third lesson plan, again, the photography student can manipulate only the shutter speed. So again, based on this understanding, once I start clicking on the different shutter speed numbers, I could see the image gets updated, and I could also see it in the preview image, the shutter speed preview boxes. And based on this understanding, I can again see that the lower shutter speed number allows more light into the camera, thus better suited for specific conditions. For example, if I also go in a lower number, you can see that the water gets a lot more cloudy and more it's not as clear as a higher shutter speed number, where the water looks very sharp and everything actually looks very sharp, versus when I go to the lower number, and you can see it's more much smoother than the higher shutter speed numbers. I can also come back to my the actual website, and once I click on that, again I could see basic animation, how the slower shutter speed will move slower, so it allows more light in. I could also see like how the slower shutter speed can affect the amount of light that comes into the camera versus the faster shutter speed. And again, I will have access to additional exercises that I could complete to better understand the shutter speed setting. The last lesson plan is on basically when the photography student can interact with all the settings dynamically. This is of particular importance because once the photography students understands how film speed interacts with light, and how the opening of the aperture allows more or less light in, and how the shutter speed again affects how quickly or how slowly light gets into the camera. By the time the photography student gets to lesson plan 4, they can better understand and comprehend the full interaction with all these settings simultaneously. So again, if I go back to my f-stop 2.8, I could again manipulate these settings. If I want to kind of see the water so it's more smooth, I can simply click on a lower number, and I can automatically see the water like smooths out. And if I decide that maybe if it's a little too dark, and if I move that, you can see that again the water is not it's no longer as smooth as when I had it as 2.8. So basically the depth of field is much more significant as at a lower f-stop number than a higher f-stop number. You can also see as I go on a higher number, I can actually read the text and I can see the bird cage and I can see the water a lot more clearly than when I'm on a lower f-stop where it allows uh, a lot basically you get more of a depth of field. So by providing immediate visual feedback through direct manipulation and interaction and seeing the result in the preview window and also being able to compare the manipulated image with the original image, the beginning photography student can fully and much better understand the dynamics between these three main settings, the aperture, shutter, and film speed, and all the combination between these three settings that produce the final imaging result.